I want you to, as you're getting seated, I want you just to close your eyes just for a second. Even if you're watching online, wherever you are, if possible, just close your eyes just for a second. I want to ask you a question I want you to think about as we dive into this message. And I want you to think about your current spiritual state, your current life situation, all that you're facing. If you were honest, would you describe your current spiritual state by the word victory, or would you use the word defeat? Victory or defeat? Which one would you choose? You can open your eyes. I'm concerned that too many Christians really have a look or a posture of defeat. And when talking, their words are more about the problems that they're facing than what God is doing in the midst of those problems. In other words, they're talking more about the difficult situation rather than the victory that God is bringing through that situation. And when we only look at the negatives in our lives, the problems, the difficulties, the struggles, the attacks, what happens is we can kind of see our weakness. We can see how we are defeated. And we can use all the outside lingo we want and all the Christian jargon and sayings, but on the inside, there's a whole different reality going on. And what happens is when we only see the negatives, and that's our focus, it leads us to two very difficult D words, discouragement and disappointment. And those two words are big access points to the enemy for him to come in and cause us to doubt God's goodness. Where he can throw accusations against God that in that moment, because all we see is negative, that we can agree with his stance that says God isn't good. So then it leads to us feeling condemned and even further defeated. And what happens with defeat, it almost becomes like a cloak that we wear that just covers us. And it affects our demeanor. It affects our words. So there's really an absence of joy or victory. Romans 8:37, using the New American Standard Version, it says, we overwhelmingly conquer. One of those great promise verses. But if we really believe that, why do sometimes we look like we've been conquered by a difficulty? Whether you want to call it a storm, whether you call it a mountain, whether you call it attack, but the issue can be so big that it consumes our focus, so we can't even see the path to victory. It's like only seeing clouds in the sky that are blocking the sun instead of seeing the light that's shining through the clouds. That's all we see is we see the problem, we see the negatives. But yet, so often, because this is what God does, there's victories in the midst of the challenges that we can absolutely miss if we're laser focused on the issue. We're beginning a new series that's called In My Story, There's Victory. And over the next few weeks, we're going to have our communicators share their personal story. And what you're going to find through their story is your story. It's going to be amazing. Some are going to talk about almost their full life testimony. Others are going to tell about a situation they're going through right now. In the next few weeks, you're going to go, wow, that sounds just like my story. But in their story, what they're going to talk about is not just the problem. They're going to talk about the victory that is happening in their life. Why are we doing this? So in your very real story that you're going through, the very big struggle you're facing right now, that you don't get so laser focused on the issue that you miss what God is doing. So as you hear their story, you go, that sounds familiar, but as they tell about the victory, you can go, oh, what was missing that? Because we can miss it so big because we get focused on the negative. But we want you seeing the victories that are happening through Jesus Christ in your life. And we want to shift your perspective to faith so you can rise above the problem and see God's truth. Because the enemy, he wants to wreak havoc in your mind. He wants to get in there and tell you all kind of negatives and get you focused on that. And what happens is when he's doing that and our thoughts are there, whatever's happening in our mind is going to come out through our life. And then what happens is we start using words of defeat. And then those words of defeat, it's like they're death coming into our life and bringing even further darkness. And it's like we give that issue then power and life over us because we're just talking about it. The more we talk about it, it's like the more power it has over us and the more we're pressed down. And I want you to see this in Proverbs 18:21, well-known verse. But I want you to see, really there's two parts. There's two choices, if you will. It says both death and life are in the power of the tongue. And they who indulge in it shall eat the fruit of it for death or life. What our mouths should be declaring is victory. What God is doing in the problem, in the struggle. And what does that do? What do those words do? When we say it, it brings life into us. Because our ears hear the words we're saying. So when you're speaking life, guess what? Life is coming into you and even those around you. And that's why we want you to hear from us our stories, because we're going to proclaim life in the midst of our difficult situation. And what are we doing? By the way, we're reminding ourselves. But we're also telling you because we want you having life as well. Because those words have power. Now, what we don't do is deny the problem exists. We're not saying the problem isn't real. It's real. And we need to acknowledge it. And it is okay to talk about it. We need to address it. We don't just ignore problems. That doesn't solve anything. We don't ignore an enemy that's right there in front of us. No, we acknowledge it. And it's okay to talk about it. And we have to fight. But we have to have God's perspective of victory because it affects how we talk about it. Because our words affect our mind. And we don't want to let that thing, whatever it is, defeat us. Rather, we want to have faith through God's truth that brings victory in Jesus Christ, even if we don't see it in the moment. Because sometimes it's not always clear, and we want it being clear for you. So let me ask you a question. Those of you who are going through something difficult, the words you're using, the story you're telling when you tell people what's going on, what's the words most about? The problem or the victory that God's doing through the problem? We want to shift that to victory. Why is that? Because there's power in it. Look at this in Revelation 12:11. Another well-known verse. And right before this, it talks about how the enemy was accusing, fighting against believers and disciples of Jesus, attacking them before God. Sometimes that's hard because when he's accusing, we're kind of like, yeah, he's right. And we feel defeated. But look at what these disciples did. It says they overcame the enemy. They defeated him. Why? Because of the blood of the Lamb, the power of Jesus, and what he did for us on the cross that defeated death and defeated sin. It says they overcame. That's where it begins. But look at what follows behind it. It said, and because of the word of their testimony, basically saying, here's what Jesus did, and here's what that means in my life. Here's the reality of what it's doing inside of me. Yeah, what around me looks so difficult. Looks like it defeated me. There's victory. And we need to know that, and others need to know our story as well. In other words, our words match what God is doing. I want you to see this thought. That it's all about choosing whether to see the power of the situation over us or the power of God over the situation. It's a choice that you have. Which one are you choosing? Let me give you a truth that if you've been at Livingston Church for a while, you've heard this verse a lot, you will hear it a lot. And I think especially as the days get darker and darker, we need to know this verse. And I would encourage you, memorize it. Get you a little 3x5 note card. Write it on there. Keep it with you. Because you need to know this in our very dark world. And it's Romans 8:28. And it says, and we know. Look at your neighbor and say, I know. Look at your other neighbor and say, you need to know. And we know that God causes all things. How many things? All things to work together for good. Now, there's a caveat to it. It just ain't for everybody. It's for those who love God. Who loves God in this place? We see it online. You love God. I see your hands. Amen. That's a promise. That's the reality. That is the truth. That's not a hope. That's not something we just stick on the refrigerator and say, I hope so. Sounds real good. No, that is reality. That is a promise of God. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to His purpose. That is the truth. That's what our mouths need to be saying. Yes, I'm going through this difficult situation. Oh, but let me tell you what God's doing. Because they overcame Him by the blood of the Lamb, what God did, and the word of their testimony. I want to show you this, Paul, mighty man of God, established the church as we know it today. Went through so much. I just don't know how he did it. We know he did it, power of the Spirit. But I look at his story, and I have one of those moments going, thank God I have my life. I'm just going to tell you right now, and not Paul's, because that was tough. But he gets thrown in jail multiple times, and one of the times he's in jail, he just starts writing letters to the churches that he helped start and was walking with. He could have talked about, man, I'm preaching the gospel, and they threw me in jail. This is so unfair. And he could talk to God, I'm so mad at you. I don't get what you're doing. Why are you doing this? He could do that and give life to the problem and wallow in defeat. But he chooses something different. I want you to see this. It's Philippians chapter 1, beginning verse 12. He's in jail. Remember this. He's in prison. He says, now I want you to know, brethren, that my circumstances have turned out for the greater progress of the gospel. Wow, what an interesting perspective. He didn't go, man, they beat me up. I'm all bruised and battered. Can't get out. Stuck in here. Wish I was out there preaching. Can't fulfill my God purpose. He's going, no, this is actually good. It's even better. It's better I'm sitting in here than out there. It's crazy. But what a perspective. Why? Because he saw the victory that God was doing. He goes on in verse 18. He says, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed. And in this I rejoice. Yes, I will rejoice. He's in jail. Yes, I will rejoice. He's bound in chains. Yes, I will rejoice. He can't go out in the street and preach. He says, yes, I will rejoice. Man, what is happening out there? Yes, I will rejoice. Whatever you're going through, yes, I will rejoice. Whatever the mountain is, yes, I will rejoice. Whatever the enemy's trying to do, yes, I will rejoice. Because God is moving and He's working all things together for your good. You need to know that. And then he goes on to say, for I know, here again, he knows that this will turn out for my deliverance. Not death, not bondage, deliverance, victory. He says, through your prayers and the provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. We were at the youth retreat. They would have chapel twice a day. And they would just begin with worship. Man, it's so powerful. So, some of the things you'll see on social media is just, you'll see them worshiping. 33 students pouring out their heart to God. Full passion. One of the times I'm just sitting there, and I'm thinking about there, but I'm also thinking about my story and today, and it's all just filling my head. And this song comes on. And I'm going to show you the lyrics. If you know it, I'm going to get you to sing along. It says, I'm fighting a battle you've already won. No matter what comes my way, I will overcome. Don't know what you're doing, but I know what you've done. And I'm fighting a battle that you've already won. And I sat there going, God, you're just good. Because I know the real stories, and I know the stories of some of those youth. Man, the struggles that some of them go through, the battles they're facing right now. And 33 of them in there just lifting their hands and bowing their knees, declaring truth, not defeat. You've won. Yeah, there's a battle going on. You've already won. And we want all of you and you online to know that of what God is doing. So I'm going to share with you my difficult story this morning. As you hear this, I want you to hear maybe things that relate to whatever it is you're going through. Before I begin, I want to give you 5 insights today, but there's 3 I want to start off even before I tell my story, because you need to know these ahead of time. The first one is that victory is not the absence of struggle. We think victory is, all the problems are gone. Yeah, that's not victory. In fact, I've come to learn there is no victory without struggle. But just because you're in the midst of a struggle doesn't mean there isn't victory. The second one is defeat is a decision. Defeat ultimately is our choice. See, the power of God through the Holy Spirit that we just got finished preaching about. If you missed a series on the Holy Spirit, I'm begging you, please go back and watch it. Because He is the presence and power of God inside of us that we need to overcome. There is no overcoming without Him. And if you're not aware of His presence and what He does and how He does things, you will absolutely be defeated. But if you know who He is, there's victory through Him. Because He gives us the strength to overcome it. Without Him, we can't overcome the struggle. It will defeat us. Every temptation will give into it. The question is, are we going to fight using the Spirit's power? Because there's no victory without a struggle. And defeat is a decision. And if you don't fight, by the way, you've already lost. The third insight is victory may be different than what I think it is. I kind of have in my brain, victory is all the problems are gone. But what I've learned in my journey, that often the victory is the changes that are being made in me through the challenge. I just want the problem gone. And God goes, that's not how I see it. Randy, don't miss the changes that are happening that only would have happened because of the struggle. Because struggle causes us to stop and reflect and change because we just want it to end. And God goes, I've kind of allowed it. And here's what's crazy, and this one may blow your theology out the water. Sometimes God causes the challenge. That's a tough one. Why? He said, I'm trying to change you. I'm trying to get your attention. I'm trying to get you to stop doing that and start doing this. And the only way I'm going to get your attention is that it's painful. Sometimes we just think, I just want this to end, and that's victory. That thing may not end until heaven. Ultimate victory. That the thing may destroy this body. And by the way, I'm not going to say God doesn't care about our body. He's already got eternity secure. He's like, I already got that taken care of. But there's changes I want to make in you, and that's victory. May of 2021, we had weathered through the first year of COVID, year and a half. We hadn't gotten it. I know that's a dirty word, by the way. I know it's painful. Can't stand it. Hate that word. We made it through, and then we get it. And it was the week of the Sunday that we had our outdoor. We had just a community fun day for our church and our community. And so, it kind of worked out. Didn't have to preach, but still we were at home. It was right around the birth of our granddaughter. Kind of crazy time with that. Thankfully, we got all that cleared out right when she was born. But we had the kind of the normal effects. Loss of smell, loss of taste, a little bit of coughing. Really nothing bad. We didn't get hit too hard there. But what happened afterwards for me was horrific. I was left with this brain fog. I could not think clearly. I could not process thoughts well. I couldn't remember things. I was constantly fatigued. I would sleep 10 hours a night, wake up as though I had not slept in days, all day long, tired. I would take a nap, didn't matter. Go to bed early at night, didn't matter, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I had no drive. It affected everything that I did. Even the simplest things were hard to do. I couldn't think clear about the most basic of things. Even things I loved to do that were hard. And I had a lady pray over me one day, and the Lord gave her insight into what was happening in my head. And she said, what I see, what the Lord showed me is like lamb's wool covering your brain. I was like, boy, that's a description that is true. All those things were bad, but there was something much worse. I had this deep, and the only word I can really describe it is apathy. I didn't care about anything important in my life. Y'all, when I say I didn't care about anything important, that means anyone important. It was horrific. But yet I didn't care. The things I normally love, didn't care. Just didn't care. Just didn't matter to me. And I'm sitting there, I'm a logic person. And so I'm thinking logically in my head going, this is crazy. But inside of me is going, I don't care. This is nuts. I don't care. There was no medical answers. It would cycle in and out. There were days that were fine, weeks that were fine, and it would get bad. Beginning of 2022, after the prayer of fasting, was actually good for a while. And then basically 1 year later, after we got it the first time, it hit even worse. It's beginning summer of last year. Worse than it had ever been. So hard on me, so hard on my marriage, my family. Some of y'all that had to walk with me through this, I mean, it was just tough. I lost all my joy, lost all my drive. Many times, I was ready to give up, just quit. Quit it all and just leave and not care about the consequences. And I've come to understand about a third of the people that have what's called long COVID have the exact same effects I had. When I would describe to doctors, they're like, yeah, I have patients that describe it that way. And I've encountered some others that they just said, yep, same exact thing. But let me talk about victory for a moment. And let me talk about some graces Bobby uses the word grace, and that's all of God's good things is kind of wrapped up in that word grace. A word like forgiveness is grace. Love is grace. His patience is a grace. Let me tell you about two big graces. The first was God's presence. I always felt it. In my not caring, in my apathy, in my just brain fog, I always felt the presence of God. And I don't know what I would have done without that, including when I stood up here. Trying to hear God for messages was hard, but He would help me with that. And I would get up here, y'all. I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't. There's some Sundays if I didn't show up, like, well, they'll figure it out. But yet His grace was there to help me, and I would walk up on those steps, and the moment I prayed down there, I felt the power of God, and it was like I was a different person for a while. It was so refreshing to get up here and actually have joy for about 45 minutes. Because He just supports. That's what He does. His grace. A second grace. This grace has the most beautiful name I've ever known outside of Jesus. It's the name of Aggie. God's grace through her. If you know Aggie, she is a stick with it, fight through, do what it takes. And thank God, because there's things that happened here at church that only happened because of her. Nobody would ever have known. She never talked about it, never complained. She just did. And God's grace through my wife when I was struggling, it was so hard on her because I was distant and disconnected, unloving, I'm sure, uncaring. Grace. Well, as it just gets so bad last summer, I said, something's got to be done. And thankfully, we had one of our young adults, Laurel Smiley, had gone to Bible school in Dallas and had told us about this beautiful church called Upper Room. And Danielle, our daughter, had experienced it and came back and told us about it. And I just felt this pull to go there, just get away. And normally during July, I don't preach and just take a break and just seek the Lord. And I'm like, I'm using some of that time just to go to Dallas, to Upper Room, and just go lock myself in that prayer room and just seek God. No answers. So we went. And the Lord gave me clear direction, and I actually preached about it when I got back last year. If y'all want to go back and listen to it, you can hear all the big details and all the things that He said. It was in a series called I Choose. You can go check it out. End of last July, I did like 8 weeks. So much that God showed me. But here's what I want to share today. He said He wouldn't heal me miraculously. He said, I'm not just going to take it away. He says, through your choices, there will be healing. Well, I didn't want to hear that. I just want Him to deal with it. Because I already was battling, I don't want to and I don't care to. So now my choices, really? That's what's going to bring my healing? He said, yes. So here's another insight for you. And this is one I've studied as much as any topic in all of Scripture, is that every choice I make will determine a consequence. Every choice. Every good choice will determine most times a good consequence. Every bad choice most times will determine a bad consequence. He built on what I already knew. He said, there's going to be a consequence, but you've got to choose. And here's what I've come to learn, is that my life is a direct result of my consistent choices. He says, you want a different life, make different choices. There's a life verse I have. It's one of my first memory verses. In fact, it may be the first one. But in there's Galatians 6:9. It says, let us not grow weary in doing good. For at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. Now, this is the same verse in verse 7. It says, whatever we sow, we will reap. Whatever choice we make, there will be a corresponding consequence. You can't get away with it. It's a law of God from Genesis 1 all the way to Revelation 22. Every facet of God's creation is choices and consequences, sowing and reaping, seed time and harvest, whatever you want to call it. And he said, you know what to do. And he said, if you don't give up, you will reap a harvest. So here was the fifth insight that God gave me, is that I have the power to push through, power to choose to push through how I feel. Or I can let how I feel determine what I do. Why was that my answer? Because I don't feel like it. But God asked this question, what are you going to do though you don't feel like it? See, what God began to reveal to me later is I had certain choices which I knew, but were actually, they didn't cause COVID, but they were contributing to the effects in my mind. Some of them were diet choices I was making, other choices that I was making. Now, change isn't easy, right? Healthy choices are hard. Change to do the right or healthy thing is difficult, depending on how we feel. I just don't feel like it. Well, I'm supposed to work out today. I don't feel like it. I'm supposed to go see so-and-so. I don't feel like it. It can be how we feel. Sometimes our upbringing makes it hard to make the right choices. Just what we were taught, our mindset, how we think about things, or what we believe, sometimes make it hard to do the right thing, even the godly thing. It's just tough. Sometimes our habits make it hard to do the right thing. When you've done something for so long, it's just ingrained to you, and to try to change it, Lord have mercy. It seems like all of hell against you, and it's not hell, it's the habits. You just created certain desires and certain behaviors channeled in your brain. It's how you think and how you do things. And boy, to change it is nuts. Those of you who faced addiction, you know. It's almost impossible. Sometimes the environment we're in or the people around make it hard. We want to make right choices, but all around us is pressure to do wrong. Why are you doing that? That's stupid. What's the right thing to do? Who says? Oh, God, really? Isn't it hard? Isn't it hard to change and make right choices? So here was my battle. I didn't care. But yet I wanted it to go away. I mean, it was this battle inside of me. So what do I need to do? I'm going to give you a baseline victory. You want a first step to victory? Some of you are wondering right now, I'm in the midst of it. How do I even start this process? I'm going to give you a formula. And it may seem to some of you overly simplistic, like, come on. I promise you, for some of you, for some of us, this is gold and it's so hard. Here's what it is. Don't give up. And every day, wake up. Choose to wake up. Choose to get out of bed. And choose to move toward God. Why was that for me? I didn't want to get out of bed. I just wanted to sleep. My head just could not think. And then to try to face the responsibilities I had, even though I was at minimal level, Aggie covering other things, still just the thought of them overwhelmed me. I mean, I'm waking up going, did I even sleep last night? And now I got to wake up and get up. But why did the Lord show me that? He said, just take a step forward, and the first step forward is toward me. Why? James 4:8, to me the greatest promise in all the Bible. Draw near to God, and God will draw near to you. Why is that such a magnificent promise? We get to be near the God of heaven, the God of all power, the God whose every promise is true, the God where there's healing and freedom and victory. He's my answer. But I got to get out of bed, and I got to move toward Him, intentionally choosing that. So I begin that. So I get back into July, moving into August, all the way through December, and I'm doing my very best with all of God's grace to make right choices, and nothing's changing. But don't grow weary in doing good, because at proper time you'll receive a harvest if you don't give up. So I'm just pressing forward knowing that. But I was still just frustrated, still questioning. And we get toward the end of the year, and something we do every year that God shows to do is 21 days of prayer and fasting. And I love that. I can't wait every year to do it. I've been doing it for years, and it's so powerful. And I couldn't wait to get there. And as we talked about what that looked like, we had just been renovating our youth building in 2022, and it was coming to an end right at the end of the year, so it would be ready for the first of the year. And we said, hey, why don't we take what we experienced in Dallas and bring that here for our whole church? It's like, yes. And I couldn't wait. And in there, I knew there was something great. So we began 21 days of prayer and fasting, and we set the hours. I set the hours from 5 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. Why did I do that? Because I was the one to open the building. I got to get out of bed. And I committed to all of you at 5 o'clock, that building's going to be open. But it forced me. It forced me to make a right choice. And every day, 5 o'clock, I'm in there. And then around lunch, I would go in there again. And then evening time, to close it up, I'd go in there again. And if you looked at my prayer list in 2022, I mean, I had so much stuff for me, my family, y'all, church, all community, the world, the universe I was praying for. It's columns of stuff. I had 2 prayer requests this time in there. And basically it was, Lord, help me. You know me. And I need help. You got the church, you got everybody else, you got my family, you got the whole world in your hands, as the song goes. I need you in these 2 areas, because I know these are my problems. Every day, pressing in, pressing in, pressing in. And there was one day that God did something supernatural in that room. It was breakthrough. I had an encounter with God that was physical. It woke me up. Like, the rest of that day, my heart was racing. And the days that followed were just stirring inside of me. I didn't know what was going on. The best way to describe it, when I was trying to describe it, was I feel like the Grinch who says, I feel like my heart's growing 10 times bigger. I didn't know, but it was just about to literally explode out my chest. My heart rate was racing. My blood pressure was probably through the roof. I knew God was doing something here, because I knew this was my problem, because all of our choices come out of our heart. And I asked God to change my heart. And then on Monday, the prayer and fasting ended on Sunday. Monday, I go back in that prayer room. I kept a commitment to keep going there every day, because I could feel God moving. And I go in there that morning, and then I had an appointment in downtown Baton Rouge. I get in my car, and I'm just thinking and praying, heart racing, and I'm just feeling God moving. And I feel this restoring. My emotions are coming back. I had been emotionless this whole time. Couldn't cry. If y'all know me, I'm a crier. I just am. Worship, I'm crying. Songs, I'm crying. I think about Aggie, I'm crying because I love her so much. My family, y'all, I just cry. Nothing. Stone cold. That day, I'm in my car, and tears are starting to flow. Heart going crazy. And on I-12, crossing over Airline Highway, going toward downtown, there was a thump right inside of me. Felt it. Right here. God changed my entire perspective on an issue I've had since at least 8 years old. Totally changed my entire mindset. Healed, free, done. All glory to God. God changed my heart. God changed my desires to only want to do the right things and to hate wrong things. And that's what the Holy Spirit does. He changes hearts. Let me tell you my victories. God's never leaving presence. You need need to know that. When he says, I promise to never leave you or forsake you, for those of you who are devoted your life to Jesus, that promise is true. Whether you feel him or not, it's there. Grace when I had no strength. It was a victory. A grace of my wife and some of you surrounding me, walking with me through that knew that I was sharing with what was going on, at least what I knew, because it was so confusing. God's grace through you. God's grace and answered prayer to change my heart. Some of you have been praying for a while. Can I just tell you, don't give up. Days when I wouldn't see it, I would just continue to pray. And the victory, restoration of my clarity, my joy, my energy, my health. I'm a radically different person health-wise because of God. In my story, there's victory. I'm going to ask the whole worship team to come up, and I'm going to ask you not get distracted by them, because I have 3 things you need to know. And you're going to want to write these down. And I'm going to call it an action plan to victory. Here's what I've learned. The first one is, don't give up. But press in daily to God no matter how I feel. Press in every day. I don't feel like it. Press in. Enemies against me. Press in. It's hard. Press in. I'm tired. Press in to God and don't give up. Don't let feelings dictate what you do. You tell your feelings to shut up and you go run to God. Jesus told this to the disciples in Luke 18:1. It says he told them a story to show that they should always pray and never give up. Third action plan. Do the right thing even though the doing is hard. And press on even though you're pressed against. Just do it. I know it's hard. I know it seems like it's not working. It seems like it's fruitless. Do it. Press in. Don't stop. Don't let the hardness stop you. Don't let the pressure against you by the enemy stop you. Press in. And the last one is a big one. Is to reframe the problem to see God's victory. Like I told you earlier, we can choose to see the dark cloud. That's what we can choose to see. Or we can choose to see the light bursting around that cloud and say, God is moving. The cloud is real. We don't deny there's a cloud. It's all sunshine and roses. No, it's not. We don't lie. But what do? We bring the truth that God is bringing victory in that moment. Struggle brings growth. And there is purpose in the pain. And I know that may be hard for you to hear. But there's purpose there. I don't know what your story is. I know it may be very difficult. But I hope today that maybe God gave you a different perspective. That the focus isn't to be about the difficulty, the problem, the challenge, the mountain, the storm, the attack. But rather, you see what God is doing. And I hope that my story gives you hope to keep going and don't stop. I'm going to get everybody just to stand up. And I'm going to ask the worship team to move forward. There's a song we sang this morning that we're going to sing again. And I'm going to ask, while we're doing this, that the prayer team go ahead and move your way forward. Our prayer team's going to be up here. We're going to leave the middle of this altar open, because some of you may just want to run to God. But you may say, I need somebody to pray with me, or I need to talk to somebody. That's what our prayer team is here for. And we're going to let the rest of our time together be about real ministry with God. And I encourage you to don't miss what God's doing. But as we sing this song, I'm encouraging you, don't just spectate. Let's, with our mouths, through song and worship, declare what God is doing. Because this song, I didn't know they were singing it. I love how God does that. Basically encapsulates my message. It's like taking my whole message and we put it in a really cool song. That's what's about to happen. But it's powerful. And I don't want you to miss what God wants to do. Father, I ask that right now you move as only you can. Bless your people. Lord, let this room be a place of ministry, of healing, of freedom, of victory, of deliverance, a resetting of entire thinking. Do your work in this moment, oh God. We come seeking you now because you are our answer. Move, oh God, in Jesus' name. Amen. Worship team.